Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeons Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this evening we are going to be discussing the future. With us on our panel is Monica Colbert, Whitney Brooks, and Jack Finkenbinder. Welcome, panel.
Thank
A
you.
bunch of names have been designated to the generations that followed World War II. We started out with the boomers, which is my generation, followed by Generation X, the millennials, Gen Z, and the alphas. What is your understanding of the differences in the interests, mindsets, and or belief systems of these groups when comparing them to each other? Monica, I know
Mm,
your nephew and your niece. I know your mother.
yes,
There is a range there, a
absolutely.
generational range. So, is there any differences in the way they think that you can tell us about?
You know, it's yeah, thinking about this question and just has me thinking about, bringing nostalgia back from my childhood and thinking about some of the differences that contrast with youth today. But yeah, thinking about all the generations. Well, I can say, one of the things is that, uh I'm Generation X, Gen X. And one of the things that I think is very different from youth today is that, we used to play outside all the time. I look out on my street, I don't see any kids outside playing ever. Um, and most of the youth today, whether it's Gen Z or the Alphas especially, are, of course, just around screens all the time, inundated with screens. And I don't know if that and Jack's and Whitney both look a lot younger than me. I don't know if that affects like how one communicates with others. I don't know if that affects how one socializes differently, or feels comfortable in real crowds or community settings. I don't know. I can't answer that, but that's a question I would have. That so much interaction, even as recently as during the pandemic, schooling even for 2 years is all on screens. Playtime is all on screens or with devices. So that I'm interested in how that generation feels their communication and socializing skills are.
All right, Jack, I think that opens it up to you as far as the issue of communication. Do you see any differences between your generation in the way they communicate and what you think, say, of your grandparents or your parents and how they communicate?
Oh, for sure. Well, I think since my generation is on electronic devices all the time, like we're always connected to other different groups of people rather than just our own generation. I think that's a big part of the differences is that we get to talk to so many other generations of people through the internet, which is a weird place because on the internet you can be anybody. So yeah, it's definitely different from what the other generations experienced as younger people, younger kids. Um, of course, my grandma, she doesn't use her electronics very often. We got her new phone, and she doesn't really know how to use it too much, but she never grew up on that. So I think that plays a big part into the differences of the generations as they go on. And I like what Monica said. Like we don't see a lot of kids on the streets playing outside anymore. I don't anyway because I'm in Alaska and it's cold. But but besides that, I don't see a lot of kids playing on the streets. My generation, I feel like we were kind of the last like of the younger group to play on the streets and stuff like that. I know I did. I know we had recess and stuff. I was homeschooled, but I know there was recess and everything. But I think Gen Alpha is gonna be mostly technology, growing up on technology, even more than us Gen Zers, to be honest. And that's a huge difference in the generations. I couldn't tell you if it's good or if it's bad, because there are good things about either or for sure. That's about all I can say to that. Yeah.
Well, I think the jury's still out on how good or how bad it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's so new. It's so new.
Yeah. Okay, Whitney. You've heard what the other panelists have said, And I think that communication is a good way that we can identify differences. But is there anything else beyond communication, or you just want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, well, first of all, I realized as we were talking, because I don't think that we really talked about um us as panelists. And so hearing them that you're Boomer and Monica's Gen X, I'm assuming Jack, you're Gen Z, and I'm a millennial, so we've got them all covered.
Great.
Yeah, very much a millennial. But
little programmers know it before you go on. I had a tough time gathering this panel because I wanted to get them all to be real young. But the only one I was able to get that was real young was Jack. But
I think it works. I think it works.
It works
I
better
like
this
having
way.
the range.
Okay, good.
If you have a burning question for a Gen Alpha, my almost 13-year-old is around here somewhere. I could bring him in if you have something you really want to ask him. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't think won't participate voluntarily. But
well, you can't force him to participate. This is all voluntary. So I mean, if you could drag him in, entice him with ice cream or something. Good luck with that.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like kind of social differences between the different generations, but I think technology is really at the forefront of all of it, and that a lot of things fall under the umbrella of technology, including communication now. But my generation was kind of like we were kind of like in this like kind of weird in between place, because I very distinctly as a child like remember doing book reports by having to go to the library and like the encyclopedia and things like that. I'm 36, by the way, so not that old, but not a spring chicken anymore either. But and having to talking on landlines. I remember our first like brick cell phone that we had and things like that. But then like in my like preteen and teenage years, I kind of came up with the internet and all the things that as the internet became more popular and all the things you could do with it, that was kind of like those were my formative years. So like I said, we're kind of in this like weird in between space between the like older Gen X and the young Gen Z and Gen Alpha, where there was like not no technology, but not how it is today, and now all the technology on the other end. I think that really is, if it's not the biggest part, it's one of the biggest differences in how our generations like understand and view the world and move through it.
Okay, before I let you go,
can I add one more thing too?
Yeah, go ahead. I hope I don't forget what I was going to say, but go ahead.
No, go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just kidding.
No, I was just going to say, I got my first cell phone. Cell phones were around, but I got my first one after 9/11. I was living in New York. And I think post 9/11, it became even more important for people to be able to reach or get in touch with one another. And so that's, I think, a big difference of, especially with the boomer generations, and this instant reach to be connected with people too, that other generations just didn't have. Now we can get a hold of anyone, know where you're at, what time you're going to be there, or what have you. Yeah.
When I was growing up, we used to there were like 30 kids in our neighborhood, and we used to, everybody had a bow and arrow, and we went down into the woods to shoot chipmunks with bows and arrows. And the parents were just fine with that. Actually, we'd be in a circle trying to, corner a chipmunk, and, could have very easily shot each other. But Whitney, what I wanted to ask you is about how you saw the difference. I think you said the socialization difference, or what? Could you give us just a little more of what you meant by that?
What did I mean by that? I think I just meant like like I said, my formative years were kind of like as the internet was coming up too, and so that kind of I think change the trajectory of like how we were being socialized, because we, were kind of coming up the same way as Gen X and boomers, but with the addition of technology, it really kind of opened up these different methods of communication that we didn't have before, with like instant messenger and like chat rooms and stuff like that, where we're talking to strangers on the internet. And I remember like my parents were very like, do not give your real name, do not give your like your address at any of those things. And now people just are like, whatever, that's like not even an issue anymore. But well, not that it's not an issue, but
Yeah, it's still an issue.
yeah, that wasn't really the right way to word that, but
Well, you mean there maybe there are some people that are less careful, and we see a lot of recklessness on the
yeah,
internet.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, so I think having that huge kind of shift in the way that we were communicating, and that was also like when people my age started getting cell phones. I got my first cell phone after I started driving. That was like the rule. They were like, okay, if you're going to be out somewhere, then now you can have a phone, because I need to be able to get a hold of you. And so I was 16 when I got my first cell phone, and that was kind of like when I first started with like texting, but not too much, because texts were like 10 cents each to send. It was ridiculous. And you had like the like T9 texting that was a total pain. But opening up these new ways of communicating with each other and other people, it just kind of changed the way that we socialize.
Yeah, I guess the consensus of our opening discussion here is that technology has had a lot to do with the way we communicate and socialize. Do I get a amen on that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. We're going to discuss the major issues or threats to our future individually. But first, I want to ask each of you what you think is the most important threat based on your experience. Jack, what do you think is the biggest threat we face as far as our future goes?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I don't want to say technology, but maybe kind of surrounding technology. Because generally technology in general is a great thing, I think. Personally, it's just wonderful, the things you can do, the people that you can connect with, but also it's horrible, the things you can do and the people you can connect with. Because you can have, say, a group of QAnoners online in this little group of QAnoners, and they can just expand, expand, expand. And I think technology is going to be a challenge and tribulation, if you will, for the future of us. Uh, but besides that, I think religion also has a lot to do with what's going to impact our future, just things like that. Uh, I
So when
think
you say religion impacting our future, you mean negatively?
negatively,
Yeah. Okay. Well,
and not always, but sometimes,
it has the
in some
potential. Yeah,
instances.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, Whitney, what do you think about that? The biggest threat to our future in your mind?
uh yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this and trying to think about like how we got here, how we got to like where we're at, and the answer is technology, for better or for worse, or one of the answers anyway. I mean, I think, having the abundance of technology and having access to, all of mankind's information at the tip of your fingers, is a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's easy to kind of like it's really easy to spread misinformation, because there's just really not a good way to regulate it, right? I mean, at least like before the internet, I'm sure there were still people who were like anti-vaxxers, but they didn't have as lot of a platform to spew their nonsense, you know, and things like that. And so I think that that will continue to be an issue going forward. But I also think that that there's a lot of kind of generational healing that's happening right now that I think will positively affect our future. Like, I truly think that we just needed to have a couple generations that needed to go to therapy and heal from all of the damage that boomers did to us before we could kind of try to, I mean, like, make the world a better place by raising our kids to be better. That was my plan anyway. And so I think that that's pretty evident in the way that Gen Z has been kind of operating on the like social political front. So in that way, I have some hope for the future and don't think that it's necessarily all doom and gloom, but we certainly have our challenges ahead of us. But I think we're off to a good start, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's good that we're not all gloom and doom. Monica, what's the biggest threat in your mind?
Yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna kind of comment and blend what the two of you guys are saying because yeah, I think technology, positive and negative. I think about technology and how it can be, weaponized and you know, it can we've seen it can interfere with political elections. We can take out whole cities with drones and not understand what targets we're even hitting necessarily. And talking about knowing all of our information, yeah, the Patriot Act gave at least the US government license to know all of our information at all, at any given time. But I also feel like the technology is connecting us a lot because we're in each other. We get to see into one another's lives and we get to see into people's lives that look differently than us, different religions, political viewpoints. And I think that does a lot towards Whitney's point of like healing generationally because we get to empathize with one another or understand each other's struggles or open discussions about that and know that that's a sanctioned thing. Mental health, getting help, talking, therapy, that this is a positive thing and a positive direction that we're moving in. So that it is hopeful.
Well, y'all are making a good point about that. The connectivity of it also connects the crazy bastards too. So there's that.
Yeah.
Okay, climate change isn't just showing up in scientific models. Hurricanes along the East Coast, wildfires in the West, droughts, then floods in California, the Colorado River Basin evaporating, thunderstorms in Trapper Creek, Alaska, and 100-degree plus temperatures every summer, everywhere. Yet, every time the price of gas goes up a nickel, we hear screaming about the need to pump more oil. Do we have the political will globally to make the economic adjustments needed to prevent us from becoming toast? Do you have any suggestions on strategies to turn this around? Monica, you are involved somewhat in politics. Do you see the political will emerging for us to fight off climate change? Oh, if I was going to be asked this question, the question previous about what's the biggest threat, my answer would have been climate change.
Climate change.
So that's where we're at right now. So, Monica, what do you see as far as the climate change issue?
Yeah, it definitely has a lot of impact on us, health-wise and economically. And it's funny you mentioned, politics because I feel like so many politicians just pay lip service to climate change and use it as, one of the points on their platforms, but I don't see real action. Sometimes we have reactions going on. We had just near where I live, and Polly, you as well, up in Beaver County, there was a train derailment and chemicals got spilled. And so now we see, politicians coming out and say, yes, we need bills and regulations and what have you, blah, blah, blah. But I don't see a lot of push. I think there's as much push back as there is push for solutions. One thing I would like to see more of a push for would be solar energy being put to use. The government may give some incentives to get solar panels in your houses, but the government could be harnessing that in a much bigger way. We could be putting solar energy to use, I think, in infrastructure in much bigger ways. And I don't even you don't really even hear conversations about that. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. This last huge infrastructure bill that was passed was supposed to really, more than anything else, address climate change, but I'm not really seeing that it's really doing all that much. Whitney, climate change. Are you as worried as I am?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's really frustrating because all of the science and data to support that it's happening and that things need to change is there, but you know people in power are so willfully ignorant that they just decide that, or like, because we live in a capitalist hellscape, they're money driven, and they just decide that those things don't matter, and they're only their own agenda matters, and that's really hard and frustrating. And in some ways I feel like a lot of the kind of societal problems that we have aren't going to go away until the, like, what's left of the, if there's anybody left of the silent generation and like the boomers, until they die out. I mean, part of me thinks that things aren't going to change until then, but logically and realistically I know that we don't have that kind of time, and so more change needs to happen now. And so I think that our generations, the Gen X and millennials, are doing the best we can, but it is nice to see that like in this last election cycle we had like our first person from Gen Z get elected into Congress or the Senate. I can't remember which one it was, but
Maxwell Frost down in Florida.
mm-hmm.
So or even like young millennials like AOC and her crew, I think are gonna, I don't know, they're certainly, like, I think the loudest voices right now for making real change towards sustainability to prevent a global disaster. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have the answer. I mean, it's certainly a problem and it's certainly terrifying. But I don't know what's gonna happen.
Jack, when I first moved up to Alaska in 2010, there was no such thing as a thunderstorm up there. But whenever I was getting ready to move back in 2019, summer thunderstorms were a common occurrence. So in just those 10 years, I saw the effect of climate change around my house up there. Now you've been on the planet for longer than 10 years, obviously, but in your lifetime, have you seen the kind of effect that I noticed before I left?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we get thunderstorms 3, 4 times in the summer now. This year I was so surprised. We had our first like genuine 3 week long rainstorm, I think. And this was in, I want to say August or September, which is during the colder months. I mean, that's when it starts to freeze over usually. Was not freezing over, just rain, just rain, pouring rain. And we started seeing snow around late October, which is weird. Usually that's not common. Um, I I've lived in a few different areas in Alaska. I've lived in southeastern rural Alaska, which, yeah, thunderstorms way more common down there anyway. But then I've lived here, which is mid area Alaska. South, thunderstorms not supposed to be common, but they are now. And then I've lived up north, and I haven't lived there in the summer, so I can't really attest to that. But I feel like summers are definitely harsh there now too.
So,
Um,
what's your concern about? Do you have a? Do you feel fearful for the future because of climate change?
I really do. Yeah, genuinely, yeah, I really do. And I see my generation trying to um I guess get groups together to conserve the climate and to try and backpedal on harmful decisions that have been made in the past. And we can't do much. There's a small percentage of us that will actually go and vote as of now, and we can't. I I haven't. I live in a weird place, so um, granted, I don't see a lot of people all the time, but the few Gen Zers that I do see nowadays are hesitant to vote because they just don't think it'll get anything done, and they don't really care that much. Um, and that's not good. I think that voting is probably one of those things that will get things done, get climate change finally maybe a little dealt with. Can't be dealt with all the way. That's always going to be a problem that we have, I feel like. Um, uh, Past when I die, it'll still be affecting us, guaranteed. That's no question. Uh,
So,
but
let me ask you about your experience. You know, you just got out of high school. Was your experience on the attitudes of your fellow students in your class, or a few classes around you, about like engaging in just the political activity of voting? Did you see total apathy there, or did you see any encouragement as far as being hopeful?
uh, no, nobody encouraged us to vote, not in our social areas, school, outside courses never really forced us to vote, if that's what you're asking. And I never
No,
really saw it.
I'm asking about how your peers felt about it.
How, oh, yeah, yeah. Carefree. Just carefree to the whole subject of voting. Like it's more of like it's not like, oh, I don't care about who's in office, who's leading us to these decisions, but it's more like are if I vote, am I even gonna have a deciding factor in this? So might as well not vote. Might as well not.
It's kind of the attitude I had at that age, but we had a little thing called the Vietnam War that got us a little bit
Yeah.
more nervous. So, okay, our past and current record on women's rights isn't all that encouraging in the Muslim world or in many states in the American Republic. However, it does appear that recently the SCOTUS decision on Dobbs and the murder of Masha Amani awakened some force, which may send it to a more favorable environment. How do you see the issue of women's rights and more broadly the LGTGQIA plus rights playing out for the remainder of your lifetime? Will the patriarchal societies continue their dominance as they have the first 10,000 years? Jack, how do you see the progress of the rights of women and gay rights in general progressing?
Well, uh, not really a topic I particularly like discussing just because it gets me a little riled up, but say abortion rights. Those are taken from us pretty cool this last year. Pretty interesting, I'd say. So yeah, um in that regard, yeah, I'm kind of hopeless. But also I'm not entirely hopeless because
What gives
people
you
really push back.
what makes you less hopeless?
People really pushed back. And
Okay.
people are still pushing back. Women primarily, but everybody is pushing back against that. I mean, I haven't looked into it a lot, so I can't really say too much. But a lot of states still have their uh, abortion freedoms in place because that's why would you lose those? It doesn't make any sense. But and LGBTQ rights, my generation is well probably one of the most free to express yourself generations, I'd say, so far. So far, just in terms of how many of us are open to expressing that kind of thing. And in terms of the patriarch, uh, I'm not extremely hopeful that that'll be amended anytime soon. I don't think, I mean, we just got our first lady vice president, and it's been too long. It's been too long. So yeah, I'm not extremely hopeful for that anytime soon, but I I do hope it happens.
Well, one of the things that I noticed in the midterm elections was that the candidates who were full all in on the Dobbs decision and voter rights, the Democrats, they won pretty big, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Monica, what's your take on that particular issue about women's rights and
Mhm.
gender
Well,
rights, etc.?
well, contrary to Jack, I actually am very hopeful about the patriarchy being upended. I think more and more women are getting into politics. I see that. And I think, things like this regression with Roe v. Wade has, ignited people to, stand up and push back, and hopefully is, bringing at least the attention for the need for more women to be in politics, to be on the Supreme Court, to be making these decisions. So I'm hopeful. I don't know if it's just like my sensibility about it, but I feel like more women are, encroaching on this political patriarchy of ours. So I'm hopeful in that it is scary to think that in this era that we women's rights have regressed so much. And if that could happen, what can happen with LGBTQ plus rights? It's hard to think about people going back in the closet or not having free expression to be who they are. But after Roe v. Wade, I just that blew my mind that could even just happen. So I think anything could happen. I mean, we can go back to racial segregation. It wouldn't, in fact, someone just called for that recently. The cartoonist for Dilbert, and I forget his name, but he got fired. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. It's scary.
Well, the numbers that you were referring to, the women starting now to, the numbers are heading in the right direction, but we are still not there yet. There's still way more white men running the show than there needs to be.
Yeah.
Okay, Whitney, what's your take on all this?
I was thinking about a video that I watched this morning that was explaining about how our entire society is built on a white supremacist foundation, just racism. And like the person who was making this video was kind of using this analogy about like growing plants, and I can't remember like the term that he used and exactly what it was, but like the idea is that like if you have this like root system that is full of whatever something, it's going to be part of the plant no matter how many times you cut that plant down. It's not going to go away until you remove the root of the problem. And I was thinking about that in regards to, I mean, everything, mostly white supremacy and the patriarchy. I think that just our whole society as humans is built on those things, and it's going to take an incredible amount of work to get rid of those things, if it's possible at all. I don't know if it is. Certainly not in my lifetime. So in that respect, I kind of feel like, I don't know, kind of like real just like sad and despondent about it. But I also know that there is a lot of really good work that's being done right now, and that we, like, yes, we might have regressed, but we also have made a lot of progress in other ways. And so it does kind of give me hope to see that more people are kind of starting to recognize and understand how things like white supremacy, racism and patriarchy affect every aspect of our lives, even in ways that you wouldn't even imagine or that you couldn't think of. And so the fact that more people are starting to recognize and understand that, I think is the first step towards getting the root system out.
Well, if you get punched in the mouth, what's going to happen is you're going to get knocked down and not be able to get up, or you're going to punch them back. And I really think that what happened with Dobbs, and also over in Iran with the murder of Amani, is that people are ready to punch back. That's my hope anyway.
Isn't that how every revolution goes? I mean, people eventually just decide that they're done with taking whatever it is and decide to fight back.